This video is going to concern flare guns and a possible reason the United States uses a minimum and sometimes preferred limit that's inadequate for them to be a true signaling device in the case of emergencies. BOTUS or Bogus Foundation was a magazine apparently at one time. Anyway, in the year 2014, they reposted 2008 tests that they did concerning all the flare cartridges that were available. It should also be pointed out that they also posted originally a copy of the 1998 images, at least, or PDF, who knows, of their original tests back then in the 1990s. In the 90s, there were 5 or 6 different flare manufacturers in the USA. By 2008, there were only 2, and they were marketed under 3 different brands. None were Westlake, Vista, Huntsman, or any other name that show up when you look up flare gun or a competitor to Olin or something like that, which is what I did. You find out those are ethylene flare incidents at chemical factories, not flare guns. I can't find a complete or really good list of the half dozen flare companies that made flare cartridges or flare launchers, and I found approximately, at maximum, 6. Some of them were rather innovative. In 1998 and in year 2008, and I'd love to see the original comparison, they tested out the heights, feet per second, glow factor, how far away something is visible, and came up with some pretty simple conclusions. A flare is only good as how high it is and how bright it is. And let's talk about handheld or mast height, short range, light only signals or other signals like flares, road flares. They have a limit based on the curvature of the Earth, and that's the end of that discussion. By the way, I don't know how anybody could think a flat Earth would work if you literally can demonstrate it this way. But anyway, they also talked about red LED flashers as well as just light flashers that are, light from white sources. They ran on 3 batteries typically because that was a pretty round number of batteries to use with a dropping resistor or a simple switching circuit, because that works out at 4.5 volts, and almost all LEDs prefer to run in the 3-point-something range, so 2 batteries just doesn't cut it unless you have an inverter circuit, which I have on my light. C batteries or AA's, it didn't matter. They got 5 or 6 hours no matter what. Now, the white LEDs waste energy a bit, so you'd assume it'd have fewer hours for the same brightness, but that's not the point. How visible it is the point. Depending on the conditions, you need red, green, blue, yellow, orange, some color changes, but white should work. Okay. Comparing that to a laser, which put all the light in one direction and used about the same amount of power, maybe, with a CR123 replaceable lithium battery, not a permanently installed or proprietary battery, you get 40 hours of your electronic flare. In the case of a laser or a light source, you might want to use one that pulses or has a mechanical rotator that works like a lighthouse rotating light thing that would flash as it goes by. SOS, all 3, ding, 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 or whatever the combination is. OSO, I might have just tapped out. It should go slowly, and it should alert everyone in the area that you need help, making that a pulsing flasher is the simplest design I can come up with. And many flashlights and some bicycle lights include the SOS function as you plug in the batteries, because that way you can hook it up to a switch, flip the switch, and it's always starting, flashing for help. And yes, on some of them you can change out the color of the LED or have various colors you can select by flipping a switch or turning a knob or something. But they're limited. How high you can get it off the ground determines how far away it's visible. Unless you can light up a cloud with thousands of watts of energy, you're going to want to have the light itself seen. What about a helium balloon and a rope? Okay, let's move on to reality. Flare cartridges invented in the 1800s, Very lights, named for the person who invented them. They can go up 1,000 feet or 300 feet. Either one of those is much better than the mast height. 40-second burn time, 900 feet high, minimum for both. That's based on the fact that it's up and over. That's a 20-second shoot and fall time, or around thereabouts. That means they have something to slow it down on descent. Maybe it's a lightweight material and flops around in the breeze. Maybe it's a parachute. Maybe it's a streamer. But either way, these go up 900 feet, and that's visible further away, and that's that. At 980 to 1,040 feet, SOLAS, aka Safety of Life at Sea, parachute flares, and various other 26mm types won the tests. Paynes, Wessex, UK, 26 millimeter, 26.5 millimeters, the actual bore diameter. Para Red Rocket MK8s were the cheapest at the time. This is compared to others that were 25 millimeter and had similar results, or 25 millimeter. It's a proprietary bore designed for the Olin or Orion flare gun, that big aluminum or zinc one you might have. It's all bright colored. Of 330 stinking feet, and it was still expensive. It's crap, don't buy it. But then again, they've probably gotten rid of it and gotten something better. There's no reason for you to accept second best if it's your life. Also, this included testing ones that were simple tubes with a screw-off knob where you pull a chain, or you open it, it pops out, and you can go like that on the side of the boat. That's what I was trained with. Or other kinds. They shoot up 1,000 feet. That's the first thing. Second, they stay up for 40 seconds or longer. Next, they're not gun-shaped, so internationally they're not restricted. Now we have the group that I like, but I'm going to have to recommend against, except for a radio, and especially a radio that'll transmit automatically if you hit a button, your GPS, and says, alert, I need help, and then put it on replay. Your best bet is going to be one of those. I'm getting to the point in the first 6 minutes because you need to know what you need to get. And yes, if they expire, it's not against the law internationally or in most areas to keep expired flares. You have to have good ones, you have to have non-expired flares, but you can keep the others as spares because 40 seconds isn't a lot of time to get help. And please get an LED or a laser flasher. Yes, the laser flasher is directional. I understand that. Get something that'll also flash so they can find you locally. The flares are seen from a long way away, but that doesn't pinpoint your position perfectly. That was a lot of P's. Now we get to the 6-second burn time, 300 foot high or higher, minimum standard, legally I guess, pen, pistol, and U.S. CG flare guns, U.S. Coast Guard, or flare cartridges, and they can work the same way. They can be stick-based, launchers, whatever. Evaluations have been made of these for various reasons, including a court case, and also by these people, but let's talk about theirs. 345 feet altitude, 12-gauge high-performance red meteor flare. These are kind of stumpy. They're 12-gauge bore. They're not smaller like 57 caliber, like the little sub-caliber things that you see in PUBG that you stick into it. These are full-bore 73, 72 caliber, blunt-looking, trauma-looking slugs. And that's 345 feet. 370 feet for a Sky Blazer red aerial flare from the same thing, or a pen flare, similar type. These only went up a certain height, and they're 12-gauge signal just like the other ones. They're cheaper in some cases, depending. The pen one is much cheaper. Then there's the Pocket Rocket red aerial flare pen gun only, and it only goes up 225 feet. I don't know why that's even there, but they evaluated it. Now, I want to point out that Sky Blazer also comes in another variety where it's too skinny to fit into the chamber, and a hack was created by putting a piece of tubing over it specifically to make it emulate the rest of the shell that's missing, so it'd fly higher, and it would outperform them. And that's one of many companies that may have gone out of business or disappeared by today's date. Remember, this is 2008, so we're many years late. Now, almost all of these, except for the ones that go up 1,000 feet, are 209 shotgun primer or blank 22 caliber or other cartridge-driven devices. They throw an object in the air and ignite the back end of it, so it burns. And a lot of them have a time delay fuse made out of a layer of literal gunpowder that's been packed in tight. It's made solid. And it acts as a mechanical fuse, or chemical fuse, for time delay, so it'll ignite as it goes up and then go out at about the same altitude. So it never comes near the ground, and you get more of the lighting as high as possible. And that's even for the other ones that are high altitude, but these are 300-footers. Shotgun primer only propelled projectiles, listing, and comparison. Testing the relative power of primers can be done in many ways, for shotguns, rifles, and pistols, and also for muzzle loaders. Somebody got the bright idea of taking his 32 caliber musket lead ball gun, putting a 50 grain or 3 gram 32 caliber lead ball in it, and testing all of the primers. And he found shotgun primers were the best for making it fly out of the barrel, as a pressure comparison, to compare what it would do. 380 feet per second and 16 foot-pounds maximum energy was what he got. And I've got dozens of references to the same thing. It's the only one who's ever done that. And that included using lots of different types of primer caps, literally cap and ball types, of whatever he could get his hands on. And did a bunch of hacks with it. So that's the only comparison I've got to work with. But that is 380 feet per second and 16 foot-pounds. Okay, now let's compare this. A safety test of that blunt and bullet-shaped 12-gauge flare. The Sky Blazer were bullet-shaped. Maybe had better performance. They were longer and skinnier. And then the blunt 12-gauge one, which was like a wad cutter. It had a dome on the front on the good one that I had, but some of them weren't. And this was involved in a felony incident involving someone shooting a flare at a cop. This is the evaluation they gave. The 109 grain or 7 gram, 240 foot per second, very, very stable between each shot, 13 foot-pound, and 370 foot altitude Sky Blazer type was compared directly with the 335 feet per second, 200 grain, 50 foot-pound at muzzle energy with 345 foot maximum height. Now, all the calculators you look up base it on how fast it leaves the muzzle, not how heavy it is or its surface area. This is obviously a bigger round. It wasn't as aerodynamic, and it was heavier. The heaviness shouldn't affect, because it's achieved that velocity, whether or not it goes up high enough. The hypothetical altitude it was supposed to be is 1,700 feet, and it only got 345. The other one, the aerodynamic one, should have gone up 880 feet, and it went up 370. And the assertion by the police, because they had to make a case, was that these both would work as traumatic weapons. 13 foot-pounds was in the BB gun range, their opinion, but the 50 foot-pound capability from your average one from Olin and Orion, because it's a 12-gauge shell, that they felt was more at the point where it could hurt, because that 200 grain item sometimes weighed less and would sometimes go much faster, double, because tiny amounts of the gunpowder that was used as the fusing timing fuse would come loose and become propellant, which also means that if you need to in a pinch and you have these expired flares, you could deliberately scrape some of it loose, grind it up a little bit, put it back into it, and then put the casing back over it and then plug it up and make a very high altitude flare. Every once in a while you fire a flare and it goes much higher. There's a lot of variability. Meanwhile, the Sky Blazers were so consistent that that never happened. That's why they considered it definitively prima facie evidence of a deadly weapon. And it was higher than 50 foot-pounds. If you're not aware of it, the U.S. Army declared that if you can hit something with a little over 60 foot-pounds of pressure, like piercing a 1-inch thick pine board, it was considered that it be the minimum force for a firearm to be reliably lethal. The idea is that it will kill. Whether it kills immediately or not is not relevant, and it should be definitively considered deadly. That is a meme. We don't know if it's factual. Now remember, we are comparing the primer driven. This is driven by a primer unless the gunpowder gets loose. To match a high-altitude flare, we would need to triple or double overcompensate the above losses because we're seeing it not doing the hypothetical heights. So we make it go hypothetically to 2,000 to 3,000 feet. What speed does it need to be? Now this is for the flare cartridges. We needed to go 360 feet per second, which some of them did, or 460 feet per second. Now here's the funny thing. At 460 feet per second, we're going to compare that to a 120 grain, 23 foot-pound, 300 feet per second versus 25 foot-pound at 8-inch, 440 feet per second, copper nylon, 38 caliber paintball gun slug that's actually used for self-defense, fired from a 12-gauge flare gun in France that's made out of metal. And it was considered lethal, and it showed signs of that because trauma wards had people coming in and dying from being hit with it. The foot-pound rating and everything else here may have compelled the U.S. government to restrict flare guns, except for the big ones, to be below the trauma rating. Plain English, the United States might have flare guns as a monopoly, because it is a monopoly by Olin and Orion, sold in the United States in a 12-gauge container, 12-gauge shotgun shell, that deliberately limited below the level that would make you visible and able to be definitively saved, to keep you from being able to fire it and actually killing somebody by accident. Not just lawyers, but the ATF may have decided we'd have to declare it a firearm if you go above the 60 foot-pound rating. So all of them are below that, which means we don't get 1,000 foot altitude, we get 300 feet. Discuss below. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck.